Shalom, my friends. Right now, at this very moment, there are millions of Americans trapped in a pattern so destructive that it's costing them their financial future, their peace of mind, and their ability to build the wealth they desperately want. They work hard, they make plans, they set goals, and then something inside them systematically destroys every opportunity that comes their way. The credit card gets maxed out again. The emergency fund gets raided for something that wasn't really an emergency. The promotion opportunity gets sabotaged by showing up late or saying the wrong thing. And the most painful part, they can't even explain why they keep doing it. This isn't about lack of knowledge or effort. This is about something far deeper, something the Torah identified over 3,000 years ago as one of the most dangerous forces in human existence. What I'm about to share with you isn't another budgeting strategy or investment tip. This is about the hidden architecture of self-sabotage that the Torah maps out with surgical precision. While modern psychology has only recently begun to understand these patterns, the ancient Jewish wisdom has contained the complete blueprint for breaking these destructive cycles since the beginning. The Torah doesn't just tell you what you're doing wrong, it reveals why you're programmed to destroy your own success, and more importantly, it provides the exact realignment protocol to reprogram your entire operating system. This knowledge has been used by Jewish communities for millennia to build intergenerational wealth even in the face of persecution, exile, and systematic oppression. Here's what most people don't understand. Your financial struggles aren't really about money. According to the Torah, they're symptoms of a deeper misalignment between your soul's purpose and your daily actions. When this alignment is off by even a few degrees, it creates a cascade of self-destructive behaviors that manifest as financial chaos. But when you understand the Torah's framework for realignment, everything changes. Not gradually, suddenly. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how the Torah identifies these patterns in your life, why you've been unconsciously destroying your own prosperity, and the specific steps to break free from this cycle forever. By the end of this video, you'll understand why every financial setback you've experienced has been trying to teach you something crucial about your true purpose. The Torah contains a startling revelation that modern psychology only discovered in the last century. Human beings are hardwired to resist their own transformation. This isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature that served our ancestors well in dangerous, unstable environments. But in the modern American financial system, this same protective mechanism becomes a wealth destruction device. The Torah specifically addresses this in the concept of stiff-necked people, not as an insult, but as a diagnostic term for a specific psychological pattern. When the Israelites repeatedly rejected abundance in favor of returning to slavery, it wasn't because they were stupid or ungrateful. It was because their internal operating system was calibrated for survival in scarcity, and abundance triggered their self-protection mechanisms. This is exactly what's happening to millions of Americans today who earn more money than their parents ever dreamed of, yet somehow end up broke by the end of every month. The Torah's genius lies in its understanding that self-sabotage isn't a character flaw. It's a misalignment between your current identity and your desired future. Every time you get close to a financial breakthrough, your subconscious mind perceives it as a threat to your existing identity. If you've always been the struggling one in your family, or if your self-concept is built around being just getting by, then actually becoming wealthy creates an identity crisis. Your mind will literally create financial emergencies, trigger impulsive spending, or cause you to make catastrophically bad decisions to preserve the identity it knows. The Torah addresses this directly through the story of the spies who scouted the Promised Land. 10 of them saw abundance and opportunity, but they also saw themselves as grasshoppers. Their self-image was so small that the blessing terrified them more than the curse. They chose 40 more years of wandering in the desert over entering abundance because their identity wasn't aligned with prosperity. What makes this particularly devastating in the American context is that our culture actively programs people for this misalignment. You're told to be grateful for what you have, while simultaneously being bombarded with messages about what you lack. You're taught that money is the root of all evil while living in a society where money determines your access to health care, education, and basic dignity. This creates what the Torah calls a broken covenant, a fundamental disconnect between your stated values and your actual behavior. When someone says they want wealth but unconsciously believes that wealthy people are greedy or that money corrupts, their mind will engineer failure to protect them from becoming what they fear. The Torah's solution isn't positive thinking or affirmations. It's a complete realignment process that addresses the root covenant, not just the symptoms. This is why Jewish communities throughout history have been able to maintain wealth-building systems even when the external culture was hostile to their prosperity. The Torah identifies 7 specific patterns of self-sabotage, each corresponding to a different misalignment in your relationship with abundance. The first is what's called Egypt consciousness, the psychological state of the Israelites who preferred the familiar suffering of slavery over the uncertainty of freedom. In modern America, this manifests as people who stay in soul-crushing jobs that barely pay the bills because at least they know what to expect. They can see the opportunity to start a business, change careers, or invest in themselves, but the predictability of their current suffering feels safer than the unknown of potential success. This pattern is especially prevalent among Americans carrying student loan debt or medical debt. The weight becomes part of their identity, and unconsciously, they make decisions that ensure the debt never fully disappears, because eliminating it would require becoming a different person. The second pattern is golden calf syndrome, creating false idols of security that ultimately betray you. The Israelites built the golden calf not because they stopped believing in God, but because they needed something tangible they could control. Modern Americans do this with credit cards, cryptocurrency hype, get-rich-quick schemes, and consumer goods that promise status. The pattern is always the same. You put your faith in something external that you can see and touch because it feels more real than the invisible principles of Torah-based wealth building. This leads to the devastating cycle where you max out credit cards to feel financially secure because having things makes you feel successful, which creates actual insecurity, which triggers more desperate spending. The Torah warns that these false idols will always demand more than they give, and anyone watching the average American's relationship with consumer debt can see this prophecy playing out in real time. The third through seventh patterns accelerate the destruction. Manna hoarding, the inability to trust in continuous provision, leading to desperate accumulation that spoils. Korah's rebellion, rejecting legitimate authority and guidance out of pride, then failing because you refuse to learn from those who've succeeded. Wilderness wandering, constantly starting over, never finishing anything, because completion would force you to face your next level of responsibility. Spies report, focusing obsessively on obstacles rather than opportunities until you talk yourself out of every blessing. And finally, breaking the tablets, destroying your own progress in moments of rage or frustration, then having to rebuild from scratch. Each pattern is a specific misalignment that the Torah addresses with surgical precision. What's particularly insidious about these patterns in American culture is that they're often disguised as virtues. The Torah cuts through this delusion and shows you exactly what you're actually doing, programming yourself for permanent financial struggle while telling yourself stories about why it's noble or necessary. The Torah introduces a concept that Western psychology wouldn't discover for another 3,000 years. You have an internal force actively working against your best interests, and it's not a moral failing. It's part of your design. The Yetzer Hara, often translated as evil inclination, is better understood as your ego's survival mechanism gone rogue. It was designed to keep you alive in life-threatening situations by triggering fight, flight, or freeze responses. But in modern America, where the threats aren't physical predators but financial opportunities, relationship growth, and personal transformation, this same mechanism interprets every positive change as a potential death threat. When you're about to take the action that would break your financial cycle, making that investment, having that difficult conversation, setting that boundary, your Yetzer Hara floods your system with fear, rationalization, and compelling reasons why now isn't the right time. This is why people sabotage job interviews, ghost potential business partners, or pick fights with their spouse right before a major opportunity. What makes the Yetzer Hara so dangerous is its sophistication. It doesn't just tell you obvious lies. It uses your own values and intelligence against you. If you value family, it will convince you that pursuing financial success means neglecting your loved ones. If you value integrity, it will persuade you that making money requires compromising your principles. If you value authenticity, it will argue that wealth will make you fake. The Torah explains that the Yetzer Hara is essentially a master strategist who knows your every weakness, fear, and insecurity because it has access to your entire psychological history. In the American context, this is particularly devastating because our culture provides endless ammunition. Your Yetzer Hara can point to legitimate examples of wealthy people being corrupt, of success requiring cutthroat behavior, of money destroying families. It doesn't matter that these aren't universal truths. They're real enough examples to make the fear feel valid. And once the fear feels valid, you'll sabotage yourself while genuinely believing you're making the wise moral choice. The Torah's solution to the Yetzer Hara isn't to eliminate it. That's impossible and actually counterproductive. Instead, you learn to recognize its voice, understand its tactics, and redirect its energy. There's a profound teaching that says the Yetzer Hara is actually the source of all human achievement when properly channeled. That driving force that makes you want more, that refuses to accept limitation, that pushes you beyond comfort, that's the same energy that sabotages you when it's misaligned. The key is what the Torah calls binding the Yetzer Hara, not destroying it, but harnessing it to serve your true purpose rather than your ego's false sense of safety. This is why some of the wealthiest people in the world come from Jewish backgrounds despite being a tiny percentage of the global population. It's not genetics or conspiracy. It's that Jewish culture has 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom on how to harness the Yetzer Hara's energy for wealth creation instead of wealth destruction. When you understand this principle and apply the Torah's realignment protocols, your entire relationship with money, opportunity, and success undergoes a fundamental transformation. The same psychological force that was keeping you broke becomes the engine that drives your prosperity. The Torah operates on a principle that modern Americans find almost incomprehensible. Your beliefs about reality literally shape your reality. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking. It's the fundamental recognition that humans don't respond to objective circumstances. They respond to their interpretation of circumstances. Two people can lose their job, and one sees it as devastating failure, while the other sees it as liberation to pursue their true calling. Two people can come into unexpected money, and one invests it wisely, while the other blows it within weeks. The difference isn't in the circumstances, it's in the belief system that interprets those circumstances. The Torah's genius is that it provides a complete belief system realignment protocol that addresses the root level, not just the surface symptoms. When you change what you believe about the nature of wealth, the purpose of money, and your relationship to abundance, your behaviors change automatically without willpower or discipline. Here's where most Americans get stuck. They're trying to change their financial behaviors while maintaining belief systems that guarantee financial struggle. You cannot budget your way out of poverty consciousness. You cannot invest your way out of unworthiness. The Torah teaches this through the concept of lev tahor, a pure heart, or more accurately, an aligned heart where your beliefs, values, and actions are in complete agreement. When you believe that wealth is limited and scarce, you'll unconsciously sabotage opportunities that could make you wealthy because accepting them would require abandoning that belief, and your ego perceives belief abandonment as ego death. This is why lottery winners often end up broke. They got money without realigning their belief system, so their subconscious mind engineered circumstances to eliminate the money and return them to their familiar, believed to be true state. The Torah addresses this by showing you how to identify every limiting belief in your financial operating system and replace it with what's called covenant thinking, beliefs aligned with divine abundance principles. The realignment process starts with what the Torah calls examining your heart. In modern terms, this means conducting a ruthless inventory of every belief you have about money, wealth, success, and your deservingness of abundance. Most Americans discover they're carrying beliefs they didn't even know they had. Rich people are greedy. Money corrupts. Poverty is noble. Wanting wealth is selfish. I'm not the kind of person who gets rich. My family has always struggled. Each of these beliefs is a misalignment that will generate self-sabotage behaviors until it's corrected. The Torah provides specific practices for extracting these beliefs, examining them in the light of divine truth, and replacing them with covenant beliefs. This isn't affirmations or positive thinking. It's a deep, often uncomfortable process of recognizing where you've been lied to, where you've lied to yourself, and where you've mistaken your current limitations for permanent reality. But when you do this work, when you genuinely realign your belief system with Torah principles of abundance, the changes in your financial life aren't gradual. They're sudden, dramatic, and permanent because you fixed the root operating system rather than just treating symptoms. The Torah understands something that modern self-help completely misses. Transformation doesn't happen through information or inspiration. It happens through ritual. A ritual, in the Torah's framework, is a physical action that programs a spiritual truth into your nervous system. This is why Jewish practice isn't just intellectual study, but embodied action. When you perform a ritual consistently, you're not just thinking differently. You're training your body, your emotions, and your subconscious mind to operate according to new principles. The Torah provides specific rituals designed to break self-sabotage patterns and reprogram your financial operating system at the deepest level. These aren't religious obligations you perform to please God. They're psychological technologies designed to rewire your relationship with abundance. And when Americans, Jewish or not, implement these rituals, the results are consistently extraordinary because they're working with 3,000-year-old wisdom rather than this decade's trending productivity hack. The first transformation ritual is Shabbat, the practice of complete rest for one day every week. Modern Americans think this is about religion or relaxation, but the Torah's intent is far more sophisticated. Shabbat programs your nervous system to believe that provision doesn't depend on your constant striving. When you can stop working for 25 hours and trust that you'll be fine, you're training yourself out of scarcity consciousness. Most Americans are trapped in what the Torah calls Egypt consciousness, the belief that if you stop working, you'll starve. This belief generates the frantic, desperate energy that repels opportunities and attracts scarcity. Shabbat is the ritual that breaks this pattern by proving, week after week, that you can rest and still be provided for. After months of this practice, your entire energetic relationship with work and money shifts. You stop chasing opportunities from desperation and start attracting them from a place of abundance. This is why Jewish business owners often report their best ideas and biggest breakthroughs come to them on Shabbat. Their mind is finally quiet enough to receive divine guidance instead of operating from fear. The second crucial ritual is tzedakah, giving away a portion of your income before you pay your own bills. To the scarcity-minded American, this sounds insane. How can I give money away when I can barely pay rent? But the Torah isn't suggesting this as charity, it's prescribing it as the antidote to the hoarding mentality that guarantees poverty. When you give from your first fruits rather than your leftovers, you're programming your subconscious mind with a revolutionary belief. There is more than enough. This isn't positive thinking, it's behavioral reprogramming. Every time you practice tzedakah, you're training your nervous system out of scarcity and into abundance. The third ritual is keeping kosher, not about food rules, but about the practice of discernment, of saying no to things that seem appealing, but ultimately aren't aligned with your highest purpose. In financial terms, this translates to the discipline of passing on opportunities that would actually derail you. The fourth ritual is studying Torah itself. committing time every day to input wisdom that contradicts your culture's programming. These rituals work synergistically to completely reprogram your financial operating system. They're not optional extras for the religious. They're the core technologies that Jewish communities have used for millennia to build and maintain wealth even in hostile environments. When you implement these rituals consistently, your self-sabotage patterns don't just decrease, they reverse, becoming self-supporting patterns instead. The final and most crucial aspect of the Torah's framework is what's called teshuvah, often mistranslated as repentance, but more accurately understood as return to your true self. The Torah teaches that self-sabotage isn't your natural state. It's a deviation from who you really are. You were created in the divine image, which means you were designed for abundance, creativity, and flourishing. Every pattern of self-sabotage is a distortion of this original design, usually installed during childhood, trauma, or cultural conditioning. The process of teshuvah isn't about becoming someone new. It's about stripping away the false identities and limiting beliefs that are covering up your true nature. In the American context, this is revolutionary because our entire culture is built on the opposite idea that you need to add more, achieve more, become more. The Torah says no. You need to remove what's false so what's true can emerge. Building your new financial identity starts with what the Torah calls knowing your name. In Hebrew culture, names aren't just labels. They're spiritual assignments, descriptions of your essential nature and purpose. When you know your true name, your divine purpose, every financial decision becomes clear because you can ask, does this align with who I really am? Most Americans are living someone else's financial life. They're pursuing careers their parents wanted, buying things advertisers convinced them they need, measuring success by metrics society imposed. No wonder they self-sabotage. They're trying to succeed at a life that isn't even theirs. The Torah's process involves getting brutally honest about whose life you're actually living and whose voice you're actually following. When you identify and eliminate all the external programming, what remains is your true financial identity, the unique way you're designed to create value and receive abundance. This identity doesn't feel like work or discipline because it's who you actually are. The self-sabotage stops because there's nothing to sabotage, you're finally aligned. The Torah provides a specific protocol for anchoring this new identity. First, you must make a public declaration, not just think about change, but speak it out loud to witnesses. This is why covenant ceremonies in the Torah are always public. Witnessing creates accountability that short-circuits the Yetzer Hara's ability to gaslight you later. Second, you must create what's called a memorial, a physical reminder of your transformation that you can return to when doubt creeps in. In ancient times, this was a stack of stones. In modern America, it might be a written covenant you sign and frame, or a symbolic object that represents your new identity. Third, you must immediately begin acting from your new identity before you feel ready. This is the principle of na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we will understand. You don't wait until you feel like a wealthy person to act like one. You act like one, and the feelings follow. This reverses the normal American approach of waiting to feel confident before taking action. The Torah's wisdom is that action creates identity, not the other way around. When you start making decisions from your true financial identity, even small ones, you create evidence that your new identity is real. That evidence then reinforces the identity, creating an upward spiral that replaces the downward spiral of self-sabotage. This isn't about faking it or pretending. It's about recognizing what's already true about you at the deepest level and giving that truth permission to express itself in your financial life. What I've shared with you today isn't theory or philosophy. It's a complete system for breaking the cycles of financial self-sabotage that have been destroying your opportunities for prosperity. The Torah identified these patterns thousands of years ago, and Jewish communities have been using this wisdom to build intergenerational wealth even in the face of persecution, exile, and systemic oppression. while your neighbors and coworkers are still trapped in the same destructive patterns, blaming external circumstances for their struggles, you now have access to the root-level solution. You understand that your financial problems aren't really about money. They're about misalignment between your soul's purpose and your daily actions, between your stated goals and your unconscious programming, between who you really are and who you've been conditioned to believe you must be. This misalignment creates the self-sabotage patterns that have been systematically destroying every opportunity for breakthrough. But now you know better. Now you understand the architecture of the problem, and more importantly, you have the Torah's proven solution. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? You can watch this video, feel inspired for a few hours, and then return to the same patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Or you can recognize this as the moment everything changes. The Torah teaches that there are pivot points in every person's life, moments when the path branches and you get to choose which reality you're going to inhabit. This is one of those moments. You can continue believing that your financial struggles are about not having enough money, not having the right opportunities, not having the right education or connections, or you can accept the uncomfortable truth that the Torah reveals. You've been sabotaging yourself, and you'll continue sabotaging yourself until you complete the realignment process. The realignment isn't easy. It requires brutal honesty about the beliefs you're carrying, the identity you've been performing, and the ways you've been betraying your true purpose. But the alternative is staying exactly where you are, watching years turn into decades, wondering why nothing ever changes despite all your effort. Shalom, my friends, and remember, the Torah's wisdom has been producing extraordinary results for 3,000 years. While empires have risen and fallen, while economic systems have collapsed and been rebuilt, these principles have remained constant because they're not based on temporary cultural trends. They're based on the fundamental architecture of how humans are designed to relate to abundance. You don't need to be Jewish to access this wisdom. You don't need to follow every religious law or adopt every cultural practice, but you do need to respect the sophistication of this system and implement it with integrity. The transformation rituals work, but only if you actually do them. The belief realignment process works, but only if you're willing to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. The identity reconstruction works, but only if you're ready to release the false self you've been protecting. This isn't about adding something to your life. It's about removing what's false so what's true can finally emerge. When that happens, when you complete the realignment and step fully into your divine design, the self-sabotage doesn't just decrease, it reverses, becoming self-support instead. That's when your financial breakthrough becomes inevitable, because you're finally aligned with the prosperity that was always meant to be yours.